the Fearless Money Management Podcast, where we empower women to take control of their finances. I'm Claire Strong, and today I'm chatting with Heather Steer, who's the founder of Divorce Transition Mentors and the co-founder of Split FYI, which is a resource support group for people going through divorce. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hi, Claire. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to have you on the show, Heather. I know, before we actually came to film today, you and I had a great chat, and because we always prep for our podcast. And during that chat, you told me about all the amazing things that you're doing. And I want you to explain a little bit more in just a second, because, hey, listen, divorce is hard enough. And then you throw in all the financial elements and it can just be so overwhelming. So first of all, Heather, just explain to our listeners a little bit about what you do, because you do wear quite a lot of hats, don't you?
I do. And so I'm a recovering CPA and a certified divorce financial analyst and a certified divorce coach. And what led me into this world was after my own divorce, I needed to go out and kind of reestablish a new career. And I was talking to my divorce attorney and I was like, what could I have done? Who could I have called besides you to get the support that I needed, whether it was for social support, educational, anything. And he brought up the idea of becoming a certified divorce financial analyst because he felt like I was really strong with all my numbers, even though I didn't feel very confident. So I established a private practice in San Diego and support people all over California. And then that led me to becoming a certified divorce coach, and where I met my business partner for Split FYI. And we came up with a concept of bringing together community support. So we support people all around the country in a group environment to help people with co-parenting issues, the emotional journey, reinventing yourself. And then I'm obviously an expert in the finance side of things. So we kind of bring everything to bear for our community of people as well.
I love this because I've also been divorced, and listening to your story, Heather, it's just, you and I both know how stressful the whole thing can be. And to have this resource available, particularly as a woman, I think is just absolutely fantastic. So you mentioned your divorce there. And if you don't mind my asking, because we do get kind of real and gritty in our podcast, what kind of challenges did you face that probably inspired you with hindsight to start this line of work?
It's the overwhelm of how much information you have to gather when you go through a divorce. It hits every single aspect of your life. I mean, and it's your children's lives, it's your financial world, it's a lot of times where you're physically living. It is an entire identity shift that you go through when you're going through a divorce, and you don't really understand that. I think it's second in terms of the grief life cycle to losing a spouse, right? Mm-hmm. So, but in the world of divorce, you're forced down a time schedule of things like trying to decide, are you going to keep the marital home? Can you afford it? Am I going to be okay financially? And all those decisions have to be made on a really strict time schedule. And one of the things, like if you have a friend whose spouse passes away and they're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to stay in the house. The first thing you would be is like, slow down the train right now. Like, let's not make a decision for a year. You're going to be okay. But in the divorce world, you're really forced to make decisions on a timeline that is not necessarily that healthy for the stage of grief you're in and your capacity, to be honest. Like when you're going through any sort of stressful situation, and, in that fight or flight part of your brain, your IQ is down about 25 points.
Wow.
So, yeah. And I was like, I needed someone, while I normally would typically have the capacity to do the work I do now, I really struggled on some days, like getting my energy up and having an accountability. Like I could have used an accountability partner. I could have used a community that would make me feel less alone. And just helping to normalize, what was going on. And that's, probably one of the biggest gifts that we've been able to bring to our community at Split FYI. And then that I bring to my private practice clients is that kind of normalizing what's going on and then really being a strategic thinking partner as you're having to make these tough very serious life decisions.
Yeah, you made a great point there, Heather, because divorce is very emotional. The whole aspect of it is you've got, like you mentioned, you've got the grief, you've got anger, you've got all of these really intense emotions. But how do you work with your clients to take the emotion out of it and to get them to, focus on, hard money basically and financial decisions that are potentially going to impact them for the rest of their lives?
And that is definitely the secret sauce to me working with my clients is partly understanding what are the emotional ties and energy to whether it's, to a particular house. A lot of times people think the four walls of your house are what make up your home. And it's just understanding what are they passionate about? What really matters to them? And then starting to work with them on how to craft a settlement that's going to feel good for them emotionally and work out financially, which sometimes are at odds. So, and if I can get my clients out of a fear-based space and get them into a headspace, they can make clearer decisions. It's moving them into the business side of the divorce, while still acknowledging that all of the feelings are very real. I mean, I have clients across a wide financial spectrum, and I'll tell you that even if a client is going to end up with $50 million, they feel like they're going to be homeless, just like the one that's going to end up, with much less money and a more challenging resources to rebuild their lives. So, it's important to sort of recognize the general feels of divorce and then, put people in a place where they can, be as successful as possible as they do these transitions. I mean, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 in divorce, unfortunately.
Yeah, I get it. I've been there. And I'm just interested, Heather. So obviously on Fearless Money Management, we're all about empowering women to, take control of their finances and be financially literate and independent. But do you find that, divorce and the whole financial aspect of divorce impacts women differently to men?
So if I'm going to go with sort of the traditional gender roles, then yes, I will tell you it does, because in sort of a typical world, we each, when we get married, we do a division of household duties typically just to start making it, even. And it tends to be women or my stay-at-home dad clients that are the ones that are running the household. And while they may be doing all of like the errands and the shopping and things like that, they're not the ones kind of running the, day-to-day finances or even the long-term retirement planning finances. And you just, early on in your life, like in your 20s, you may have been doing it all for yourself. It's just a natural part of life when you partner up with someone, again, to divide duties. And it tends to be more of the men that keep the financial control, and that's their job, and the women's job is to manage the children's schedules and the household schedules and all of that. So I do tend to find that while women may have done it previously in their lives, you sort of lose that pencil gets very dull, and we need to resharpen it to get them back into the space of managing a day-to-day budget and managing financials, or even understanding what's going on. I mean, to be honest, a lot of couples aren't amazing at having regular financial health updates and like what's going on in their worlds. They just sort of trip along and don't, it might be someone saying, well, you're spending too much money, but the conversation doesn't go much past that. It's just, suddenly try and figure out how to save money, but that's it. So I think with a lot of my female clients, I'm having to just get them back up to speed on where things are at in their world, and and what they need to do to now take that back on board in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, because, you make a good point. A lot of the time as women, and especially as mums, we, get to a stage where, rightly or wrongly, we are dealing with so much more than men quite often. So our partners, we are looking after the kids. We're also trying to juggle careers sometimes. Maybe we're stay-at-home mums, but whatever it is, we have all of this extra responsibility quite often that men don't necessarily deal with. And in my own personal situation, when my girls were very young, Heather, I actually took 2 years out of my career to be a stay-at-home mum. And I remember feeling really vulnerable financially during those years because my husband at the time was not great with finances. And I didn't have any money of my own because I wasn't working. I was staying at home with our babies basically to help raise them and frankly to save money on childcare at the time. So I want to talk to you about the power dynamic because I have been in a situation, a few times in my life where I have felt vulnerable because my partner has been in financial control. He's been the person earning the money. And I want to know how this plays out in divorce proceedings.
It's a very interesting misconception of his money and her money that goes on. And that's something, and it varies, in each jurisdiction, each state. But for the most part, the money that's being earned is community property. But a lot of people, do use it. Unfortunately, it gets weaponized in a lot of relationships where it's like, well, I'm just going to give you enough money for groceries or enough money for this versus it being a shared pot. Or people, there's the misconception that like if you keep your finances separate, that means if one of you is a saver and one of you is a spender, that the saver is protecting their assets. But really, once you get to the divorce days, it's not true anymore. Like the saver ends up being usually pretty mad because they realize they were all the saver for so many years, and now the spender is going to get 50% of their savings. So while in the divorce world, a lot of those things start getting shored up when you're going to split assets, in the day-to-day relationship world, that control is can get a lot of relationships in trouble, to be honest. Like if you feel financially vulnerable, that's not healthy in your, in an intimate relationship, right? I mean, that's sort of, you're being, either it's financial coercion or, a lot of times I deal with financial abuse cases, and a divorce can be an opportunity to actually take that back in control and feel stronger, because that vulnerability can, hopefully be released with the relationship.
How does a woman who maybe isn't the money earner and they feel like they are not empowered financially in a relationship, how can we as women in that situation take back some power?
I think particularly if you're in a relationship, I think it's important for people to have regular conversations around money. They're very difficult conversations. I am finding that the younger generation is taking this on more directly, I think, than someone in my generation has. But I'll usually say to like friends, or whether it's my kids, what if something happens to one of you? Like, you need to know where everything is. Like, you need to have access to the bank accounts, access to passwords. You should know, like, if I was going to ask you as a listener, hey, do you know where you stand on your retirement savings right now? Like, what is your level of confidence in the trajectory that you're on? These are all conversations that should be reasonable in a partner relationship, right? So, and it would be a red flag if you brought this up and your partner is like, no, I don't want you to know anything about our finances. Like, that feels not very healthy or good. But it's very, it is really important to have these hard conversations. And there's actually financial therapists out there. One of the number one causes of divorce is money issues, right? So, anyone that sort of feels like they can't have these conversations with their spouse, I would encourage them to look up that sort of resource out there. Because we all have different money hangups, and whether that's we could be spenders or savers, like I was referencing earlier, or we could operate from a land of you never feel like you have enough, like you're always in a scarcity mindset, and there's money hoarders, and they like to save and then they spend a bunch, and they're kind of like in this ebb and flow. And And it's okay, but you just need to both understand what that pattern of money is for you and what your money type is. So I would definitely encourage people to have that and to have transparency when it comes to, the money world. There's so much energy around money that can really be used in either a weaponizing way, or it can be used in a way to come together and be building a life together.
We're talking specifically about going through divorce in this episode. And I'm just wondering how, especially if this is not something that happened during the relationship, how do women recognize their roles regarding finances, even if it wasn't them that necessarily ran the finances, if you like, in the household?
I always find that people are sort of surprised at where they end up in their role of finances, when they end up on, in my office and we're having a conversation. I'm like, well, how much do you know? What do you not know? And sadly, there's a lot of shame around it. And there's a lot of, I can't believe I was so dumb to let this person own all of this and take control of it. Like, I was really smart. I was an executive. I used to run my own thing. I had my own house in my 20s, all these things. And then suddenly totally lose sight of everything. And, like I was saying earlier, I really try to take that shame away, because it's very normal in relationships to have a division of duties. Mm-hmm. And there is the person that's just eyes on deck and, looking at the budget and looking at paying the bills and understanding what's happening. And so, one of the things I want, these listeners to understand is don't have any shame around the fact that you don't know what's going on. Like, there's opportunities to get that back on board. And in the world of divorce, you're 100% going to get it back on board. That's a total reset of your financial world. And you're going to know more about your financial world than you have ever probably known in your life all at once throughout the divorce process. That's one of the quote unquote benefits of it is, you come out with a complete inventory of where you're at. And then I'm just, through my, the way that I educate my clients, it's having them, empowered to, to carry that forward in their lives and set up some new habits. And, people are like, I'll never let the finances, go again.
It's so funny you say that, because I look back to my divorce. And at the time, you're really going through the ringer, aren't you? It's so stressful. It's so emotional. There's grief in there. There's all of the things. But it's so great that even in the depths of despair, we can grow and evolve and flourish as individuals. And at the time, it's difficult to see that, right, Heather? And I guess that part of your job is to, encourage your clients that this is going to get better. You are actually going to emerge from this, a butterfly, a stronger person, and someone who is, so knowledgeable about their finances. And with that comes, empowerment.
Yes, it is very true. That is one of the biggest rewards in my work that I do, is when I have clients that are like, reach back out to me after like a year and they're like, you were so right. Like, I'm now, loving this and I'm doing this and I have control and I'm, and they feel so much stronger, afterwards. And it's in our community, it's fun because we have people that have been there for a couple of years. And when we have new people joining, they're like, oh my gosh, I was there on day one when I started coming to these support groups and education groups. And now I'm here. And, and people who go through divorce really do, for the most part, really like to reach back and help other people that are faced with it. So that's something I would encourage if someone was facing a divorce, is to reach out to your friends who have been through divorce before, because they'll be some of your biggest allies.
Yes, 100%. I remember when I was going through my divorce, none of my friends had been divorced. I was one of the first. In fact, I was the first. I was a trendsetter. Not really, but I was the first in my friend circle to get divorced. And so I did not have that network of support around me. And so the shame for me was greatly exaggerated, because all my friends were happily married, what was the matter with me? And so I think if you can, especially, if this is a divorce that's coming maybe slightly later in life and you already have friends that have been divorced, definitely reach out, because, you'll be able to find a lot of solace, and just, just sharing tips, frankly, on how to get through that, and having someone as an inspiration who has made it through and gone on to flourish is so important. But Heather, what about some like practical tips? I'm thinking about, bill management, making things easy for ourselves when it comes to our finances, because, we've got enough on with the divorce, so we need to make our lives easier. So what tips can you give to women listening that maybe just need to streamline things, particularly at this stressful time?
The first thing that there's a couple of things that are like ground zero for me. First of all, run your credit report. Find out, do you have credit? Do you not? That's one of the number one things. Do you know your credit score? And find out, because also what happens when you are married is you tend to start combining credit, and you may not have credit anymore. You might be, operating off of credit cards from your husband or wife. I have cases like that. So just, number one, check your credit, see what's out there. And if you don't have credit, start building it immediately at the beginning of your divorce process. Go get yourself a credit card. That's really important.
Actually, in our next episode with you, we're going to go into this in more detail, especially the whole credit building thing. But just off the back of that, if I may, Heather. So I had a slightly different situation. I moved here from the UK 7 years ago.
No credit.
And my husband is American. And so I had no credit history here. So although my situation was slightly different, I wasn't going through a divorce. In fact, quite the contrary, I was actually getting remarried. I had no credit history, and I had credit cards, but they were on my husband's account. And so I didn't have any, I didn't exist from a credit standpoint. And so I have recently just started getting myself a couple of small credit cards, like with a $500 limit, like really small. But guess what's happening? I'm starting to have a credit history, and I'm building my own credit. And I can just say, to our listeners, how empowering that feels. And yeah, I may not have a, a 10 grand limit or anything that's as flashy as my husband's, but you know what? That credit card is mine. It's in my name. And now I'm in a situation where I'm actually getting offers of, from other credit card companies, because I'm doing a good job of managing this one. So anyway, continue. But I did want to just mention that, that is an absolutely great tip, to try and get credit in your own name, for sure.
100%. And I'll say this again, because this one isn't necessarily just for divorcing people. I had a very dear girlfriend of mine's husband pass away tragically. She had no credit.
God.
No credit. So when she was then faced with trying to replace a car, she couldn't get a car loan. So, these are things that just in life, credit is very essential, even whether it's divorce or death or anything else. That's a part of life, and we lose sight of it. We get comfortable and lose sight of it. The other thing that's really important is a budgeting tool.
Yes.
So there's lots of different apps and things like that. I'm actually working with my college daughter on putting together a budget and then having her monitor it. So there's a lot of good apps that you can find. They're different on a Galaxy versus an iPhone, but something like You Need a Budget is a great tool, just so that it starts flagging your spending and is watching what's going on. So I have a great tool. If anyone ever wants to email me, I'll give my email at the end of this, and it's a monthly expense budgeting tool. Just helps you brainstorm, because we're expensive. And it's a lot of hidden costs. It's a lot of hidden costs of home ownership. It's a lot of seasonal things that happen in your life. There's a well-known financial coach, Christmas is not an emergency. You need to be planning for, the seasonal budgeting events that happen, car tires, things like that. I really encourage people to analyze their lifestyle and just understand where your money is going. Just so many people have no idea. And particularly if you're not the one paying the bills and monitoring all that, you lose sight. You don't know what your utilities are. You don't know, how much vacations cost. You don't know, it's kids' sports, and it's out-of-pocket medical costs, and it's, different kinds of insurance. And there's all sorts of, it's a lot of line items. It's what my daughter is out.
And you made a good point there. I mean, just bills, utilities, when you're not the one paying them, because I've been in that situation. I haven't been the bill payer because I wasn't earning a lot. And so, my finances took care of the kids' activities, for example, but I didn't know how much the gas and electricity was, the water was, whatever it was, HOA, you name it. And so just educating yourself on that's really enlightening. And I've also just started using an app to track my spending and budgeting. So yeah, there are loads of great apps out there. And I also love that you are chatting with your daughter about all of this, because I've got 2 teenage girls too. And I'd love for them to be financially literate from right out of the gate, because I wasn't, and I feel that I'm kind of paying for it later on in life.
I agree. I'm a little bit remiss. I wish I would have been doing this more when she was in high school. Because the college budget is much more significant, because they're going out more, they're doing Ubers, they're clothing. I mean, it's a lot of spontaneous spending that she likes to do. So I am really hoping, and I believe that there's a trend in high schools to start getting finance classes back on board.
Yes.
So I'm very encouraged by that. But there's a lot of great YouTube resources for younger people, and honestly, even if you're facing a divorce, go start looking at those for just basic, finance 101.
Absolutely. And listen, for our listeners, we will reference some of these links to, for you in the show notes. So please check those out. And Heather, oh my gosh, this has just been so helpful. I'm just picturing myself when I was going through my divorce. I needed a Heather. So I hope that, if you at home are going through this right now, that today's episode has been really helpful. Just a quick spoiler alert, Heather's actually going to be joining us on another episode, and we're going to look more deeply into recovering from a financial standpoint after a divorce. So please check that one out. But in the meantime, Heather, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So you can check out either of my websites. It's divorcetransitionmentors.com or splitfyi.com. And, would love to have anyone join our community at Split. It's a fabulous place to land and find like-minded people going through divorce. So would love to see you there. And you can email me at heather@splitfyi.com as well.
Okay, that's great, Heather. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a joy chatting with you, and I can't wait to speak to you again on our next episode. And with that brings us to the end of today's episode of Fearless Money Management. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us to reach even more amazing women on their journey to financial freedom. Bye for now.